Good evening. This is the Carver Town Finance Committee meeting for June 27, 2022. The time is 7:01. Can we all rise for the pledge? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Meeting's being recorded tonight by Area 58. Thank you. Any public comment? I'd like to welcome Mr. Fennessy. This is his first meeting with the Finance Committee as our permanent town administrator. Congratulations, Mr. Fennessy.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
The first item is going to be the grant application for, I'm assuming you're here for South Coastal County's Legal Services.
Correct.
Please, come up.
Here at the table?
Sure. Would you be so kind?
Thank you.
Send two down that way. These are printed on double sides for everybody. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Yost,
Yox, Raymond
Yox.
Yox is my name.
how are you?
Good.
Floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you. Well, our organization, South Coastal County's Legal Services, been a long time grantee of the town of Carver. Town grants, we used to come to the local post office and get signatures and get an article on the warrant for town meeting and get it voted on, but your procedure changed a couple years ago. And I was here for the beginning of that, but after that we kind of missed out because I wasn't aware of when the new filing deadline was. So we hadn't gotten a grant from the town of Carver in a couple of years, and I saw it on the website recently and realized I was missing my opportunity and put the deadline in this year, and I did apply for it. But anyways, South Coastal County's Legal Services is the legal aid provider for southeastern Massachusetts. Our main office is in Fall River, but we have offices in New Bedford, Brockton, and Hyannis also. And right now, I think we have over 50 attorneys working for the organization in those four offices. But what we do is we provide free legal services to people of low income and the elderly, okay, in civil legal matters. So criminal matters are handled by the Public Defender's Office. We're the provider of free legal services to low income and elderly people in civil matters. So for anybody who's elderly, age 60 and over, they're eligible. For all others under age 60, you have to have income below 200% of the federal poverty level to be eligible for our services. And then you have to have a legal problem that falls within our organization's priorities, which are mostly in the areas of housing law, public benefits, family law. We do some consumer matters, immigration work, and there's particular needs of the elderly, such things as getting proper health benefits, Medicare, and certain transactional work for the elderly, such as healthcare proxies and powers of attorney. But if you qualify for our services and you have a problem in one of our priority areas, then you could be eligible to get these services free of charge. And there is no other organization like that in southeastern Massachusetts. We are a not-for-profit organization that gets money mostly from a Massachusetts funder called the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation, also a federal program called the Legal Services Corporation. But we have a variety of other grants. We have an AmeriCorps program within our organization. There's been a couple other federal grants that have been available in recent years. We get funding from a lot of towns on the Cape, a couple here in Plymouth, including Carver until recently, and then also Halifax. And United Ways, the Mass Bar Foundation, just other organizations that fund us. And so with the funding that we get from these variety of sources, that's what gives us the funding to hire our staff. So again, the main office is in Fall River. That's where our administrative office is. And then there's also a law office there. And in New Bedford and Brockton. And in the Brockton area, we actually call our law office up there the Justice Center for Southeastern Massachusetts. It's kind of considered a subsidiary of our organization, and it has to do with a certain funding that we get that we wanted to separate because certain funding from the Legal Services Corporation has some restrictions on it. And with the Justice Center, we don't have the legal services money there, which allows them to do work like immigration work. So the town of Carver, actually being in Plymouth County, can be served both out of Brockton for certain issues and then out of Hyannis for most of the issues. It was in the old area of what used to be Legal Services for Cape Cod and Islands, which was an organization that existed when I first came here. We merged into this bigger organization, but Legal Services for Cape Cod and Islands served Carver for going way back to its formation back in the late 60s. So we have attorneys that specialize in the areas of practice. When I talk about housing law, we're mostly helping people who have subsidized housing, maybe facing eviction or trying to get their subsidy or possibly in danger of losing their subsidized housing. In public benefits, we help people get unemployment benefits, Social Security benefits, the different welfare benefits, food stamps, mass health, and Medicare. For family law, we mostly represent victims of domestic violence. We've had some grants in recent years that allow us to provide representation to all sorts of victims of crime. So it kind of broadened what we could do, but oftentimes that money went to help victims of domestic violence. Again, we have attorneys that specialize in family law, but the type of cases they take usually are representing victims of domestic violence, helping them get divorces, protective orders, child support, custody orders, and the like. Again, out of the Justice Center, we do a certain amount of immigration work, and our program has expanded a little bit more recently in doing some consumer issues. We just hired a consumer coordinator for the whole program, a consumer law coordinator for the whole program. And we do some work with education law, helping certain students get access to special education, have special education needs. We also provide some representation to students facing student discipline, possibly suspension or even expulsion from school, which entitles the student to a certain amount of due process rights. And it's helpful to have representation at those hearings. So those are basically the types of services we get, and they're available to the people of Carver. They just need to contact us. Most of our cases come through an intake process where people call our intake lines, a toll-free number. We have access, or people can find us on the internet. We have a website. I think we have Facebook and Twitter accounts also for kind of advertising purposes or for people to know about us or learn about us. But the phone number is there, and usually if somebody's seeking services from us, they have to call the toll-free number, and they go through this intake process where they're questioned about their eligibility and the type of legal problem they have. And then once it's determined what their problem is, where they live, the case is sent to the appropriate office. Again, in Bristol County, Plymouth County, the Cape and Islands, for appropriate services. And then they get matched up with an attorney, and the attorney takes their case and provides whatever services we feel are appropriate. So this does include litigation. We do represent people in the courts of the Commonwealth. And sometimes, depending on what the services are needed, we may only provide counsel and advice or other brief services or other transactional assistance. But we do provide the full gamut of civil legal services, including representation in courts and administrative hearings. Again, if somebody's low income or elderly and they have a problem within our service area, they get a hold of us. They can get an attorney, and the services aren't going to be at any cost to them. We find that the services that we provide are, for the people that are in the most in need for some type of legal help, that they face their consequences sometimes if they can't get legal help, such as losing their home or remaining victims of domestic violence or not being able to enforce certain rights that they may have for certain benefits and sources of income. Without legal assistance, they sometimes can't access that level of justice. And I think it's also important to understand the concept of equal access to justice, that the legal system is complicated, but it's an important part of our civil life, that people have access to the courts to resolve grievances, but for it to be fair, all parties should have access to an attorney, not just people can afford it. And it makes it a more equal and fair system if all people can get access to justice. That's kind of an overarching goal of ours, is to provide equal access to justice, especially in the civil courts. Besides our services, we also do coordinate some of the efforts of the local bar associations to do pro bono work. So most attorneys have at least an ethical obligation to provide pro bono work, to volunteer and help low-income people. Oftentimes, attorneys will contact us. We have a panel of pro bono attorneys and a pro bono coordinator who works with those attorneys, and we can assign them cases, and they'll take cases also for no fee. For certain clients of ours. And sometimes we can expand some of the priorities that we have by enlisting the private bar. We sometimes have private attorneys that will do bankruptcies and things like that we generally don't do in-house. This is an example. We've come to the town of Carver this year. We're asking for $5,000. I believe that was the amount of our last grant. We're not asking for much of an increase over what we received before. I think this money does help the residents of Carver, some of your most needy residents in certain civil matters. When they need legal help, they can access it through our program. Over the years, we've represented a lot of people from the town of Carver, and we hope to continue to do so. We'll represent members or residents of Carver with funding or without the funding, but because we do have a lot of sources of funding. But I found that the grants from the towns, especially in the Cape and Plymouth area, it's been very helpful over the years in helping us kind of expand the services. The combined small amount of grants that we get from all of them usually allows us to maybe add one more attorney to our staff. This gives us greater flexibility and greater ability to take more cases. We don't really have the ability to represent everybody. We don't have enough funding for that. Probably represent anywhere from 35 to 40% of the need in southeastern Massachusetts. We try to do what we can with the resources we have, and a lot of very qualified attorneys with a goal of trying to help people serve our programs. So we're pretty proud of our staff and the work that we've done for the community and the communities in southeastern Massachusetts over probably going on 50 years of service throughout. And we look forward to working with the town of Carver and hopefully with a little extra funds to help us serve the residents of the town of Carver. If anybody has any questions.
Anybody? Pat?
Thank you. You provide a great service, and that's very much needed and so forth. But on your contributions and clients served chart, we know why you didn't get an award from Carver this year or last year, and you explained that. But you don't have anything in the number of clients served in either Carver or a couple of others, but particularly Carver.
Yeah, I guess that chart went out to people who we were getting funding from, so this is probably an oversight of how many serve. I would say from Carver we would probably average somewhere between 15 and 20 clients per year.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It says that on your... You propose that its attorneys and paralegals represent Carver residents in 15 cases with the above priorities, providing over 60 hours of legal representation in the process. Is that what you had in the past, was right around 60, around 50?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers fluctuate from year to year. 15's maybe a little bit on the low side for us, but that may have been what we did last year. I mean, with the coronavirus and all, the service numbers did decline over the last couple of years. Courts were inactive and things.
What's the thought process in not having means testing for the elderly over 60?
Well, it's a federal grant. It comes through what they call Title IIIB, and it's what Congress chose to do with funding. So
So you're not allowed to means test?
Right.
Okay.
The funding says that anybody over age 60 is eligible. So that's we get the grant, and we just follow the government guidelines on who we can serve, and they say no means testing for elders.
Thank you.
Free lawyer fire.
I was thinking of someone that has discretionary income like you shouldn't need their services.
Thank you.
We do try to focus more of our attention on the truly needy elders, although we can at times
Yeah, I would hope
provide.
so.
He's a needy elder. Don't let anybody kid you.
Not financially.
No?
He does work at a golf place, you know, he's trying to supplement
Ever
his.
seen my basement?
He does, yes.
Anyone else?
I was just going to ask, thank you. I do think I agree with Pat that you provide a very valuable service. How do people go about accessing services? Is there, where are you advertising, that sort of thing, even to local Carver families, so that they know these services are available to them?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is mostly social media stuff that where we people can find us now, like on Facebook, Twitter, the internet. Okay, nobody really gets phone books anymore. It used to be a commonplace to look up lawyers' numbers, but we've been an organization that's been here, like I said, for 50 years. We have pamphlets that we distribute to different offices and funders, different agencies. A lot of the notices that go out for like government agencies and things like that, like the Department of Transitional Assistance and DSS and Department of Unemployment Assistance, when they send out notices to people about benefits, and they may tell them that you have a right to challenge the decision on your benefits, and if you need an attorney, contact South Coastal County's Legal Services. Housing authorities throughout the region, when they take steps that affect the rights of recipients of their benefits, oftentimes send out notices and tell people in those notices that they have a right to get an attorney and that they can access South Coastal County's Legal Services. So our phone number is distributed in that way. It's really one toll-free number that people can call from any part of the counties that we serve: Bristol, Plymouth, Barnstable, Dukes, Nantucket. And they call it the toll-free number, and they get into our intake system. We do have Spanish and Portuguese-speaking paralegals, so people with language need special language assistance can reach us pretty handily if they speak those languages. We also subscribe to a translation service where almost any language could be provided within a couple hours of a translator that will, somebody is calling us and needs a language. But yeah, I mean, there's not I wouldn't say we do a lot of public advertising, like on the public airways, or, we don't pay for advertising anywhere. It's mostly just by historical or notices or through social media.
Okay, thank you.
We could put this on the, maybe the Council on Aging newsletter.
Yeah, I think
So let them know about it.
I think something like that, or postings here throughout the office, or at least
Maybe we
departments.
could put it even
within
on,
Town Hall.
on the website.
There's offices within Town Hall that might be aware of it, as people come in to conduct town business, if something's relevant. Sometimes people come in and express a hardship when they have to pay a real estate bill or what have you.
Well, I do know someone that has used your services before, and it was very successful for them, so
Great.
they were definitely in need, given the current.
I could send some pamphlets to town clerk or.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
Okay, sure.
That would be great. I'm sorry you didn't apply last year.
Yeah, it's my fault. I
I
didn't
went
look.
looking through to see who had in the past and who hadn't, and I think I sent an email asking if you were interested, and I think they crossed.
Well, it was about the same time that you
Yeah, about
you
the-
contacted us, but I had
that's right,
also
that's right.
realized I've been missing,
right.
submitted an application here and looked it up and found it on the internet. So your website, the Town of Carver website, had the RFP listed.
So if anyone has any other questions? It's the will of the board.
I'll make a motion to recommend or approve the grant for $5,000 for the South Coastal County's Legal Services.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve the grant for South Coastal County Legal Services for the FY '23 fiscal year.
23 or 20.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The only thing we don't have is the memorandum of agreement is not signed. Susan did not sign it.
Okay, I thought we had to wait till it got approved, but
No,
yes, I'll have her
no.
sign it and.
If
send-
you can sign it, and then I'll get you a copy of it, but this needs to be signed.
I believe it came with the packet, so I may have a copy of it, maybe not. But,
You should have. Actually, I got probably 2 copies. I think we got 2 sets of documents.
The memorandum of agreement?
Yep,
Yeah, the MOA.
exactly, yep.
Yes, I can have our executive director sign it probably.
If you
this
could do
week.
that and send it back to me, that would be great.
Okay,
I prefer to have her as the one who signs.
Right, I will have her sign.
But as soon as I get it back, I'll sign off on it, so you're all set for tonight. The board have any problem with me doing that when I get it back?
No, I don't.
Everybody has the copy, you see it's just unsigned. But I'm gonna mark down the approved tonight, and it was, the vote was 1, 2, 3.
7.
7-0. 0. 5,000. Okay, and as soon as I get, as soon as you send that back to me, I'll just copy this onto it and I'll sign
Great.
off on it. You have a copy?
Yes.
Okay, just,
Is it-
yep.
Does he need to invoice us as well?
Yes.
So I think normally we invoice like quarterly, we send statistics for clients served and an invoice. I think most times we do that on a quarterly basis. Is
The
that
way we do it is, we're gonna ask that you just send us an invoice. When you send this back to us
Oh.
signed, just send us an invoice with it for the
Okay.
$5,000.
Okay. Full
And then we'll
invoice,
cut you one check,
okay.
probably this to be the second weekend, the second pay period in July now. So we won't make the first.
Okay,
And then we'll get that out to you.
great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you for the help you give. Appreciate it. Okay. Social Community Action Council has asked that we put this off one more meeting. So she sent me Susan sent me an email tonight asking that she was unable to attend, so could we do this the next meeting? So I'll just notify her when our next meeting is. All right, Town Administrator and Finance Director update, year-end budget outlook. Hi.
Yes, I'm alone.
You know how lawyers are when they get together, they're like the brotherhood. You know?
Once he gets the job.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right?
All right, well, wait a second, take your time.
All right.
Bob's got the job, I don't think he's applying. Is he applying for this job over there?
He's got applications in other towns now.
Really? Well, that's good to know. Too little late for weighing your options now, isn't there a contract?
Forgot this is going out live, I probably shouldn't say stuff
We
like
can,
that.
yeah, you know what, let's do that, we'll skip up, that's a good idea. Let's skip up while we're waiting for Bob to come back in, if you don't mind, Sue. An appointment to the committee to represent us for capital outlay.
What was it?
We're up to, that's great. That's some good security.
We're doing the capital outlay appointment?
I'm just waiting.
Sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Beth Selger to the capital outlay committee.
Second?
Motion made and seconded, do you want it?
Yes.
Well, I asked this question before, and she said, but only if somebody else, if somebody else, and I said, stop. So,
I feel like I towards the end had a much better handle on it and would like to do it one
I
more.
think you did a fabulous job.
It was rough at the beginning.
That too.
You did an absolutely fabulous job. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of appointing Beth to the Capital Outlay Committee for the coming year, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? You can abstain.
Yeah.
601. Congratulations. Well, my condolences, whichever. Okay, now that Mr. Fennessy finally joined us, we can get back to our originally scheduled broadcast. Where are we at?
You have 3 minutes.
I know, my alarm's gonna go off. It's time for bed.
All right, you wanna give an update on the
So you have in front of you the worksheet that I prepared for end-of-year transfers. And the first section is areas of departments that either were under budgeted or things changed throughout the year to require more money to be funded to those salaries. those items, and then the sources at the bottom. So there's like $362,870 of required funds, but it's not really a deficit per se, because we do have the money in the other departments to cover that money. So it's not like we're trying to come up with it from free cash or anything like that. It's budgeted money, but wasn't spent in one department, but needed to be spent in another department.
Yeah, so I'm going to add to that. So if you look, the 1/3 of that amount is police salaries, and most of that police salaries, other than the contractual issues that were added in, was overtime. And this was because of COVID. It had issues with filling shifts. Oh, we got to get that light fixed or taken out of there or something.
I still can't believe this is the last room in the building that doesn't have new
Well,
LED lights.
Just
Should've
really
been the
quick, because
first.
they were trying to retrofit these and that.
Can't, just take them out,
Yeah,
throw them in the
that-
trash, and
that's
put
what's-
lights in.
That's what's gonna happen. Dave's got them in order, so. So anyway, there was issues with, one of the issues too with the overtime is that over the past 8 years, contractual salaries had gone up. Yet every year, the bottom line dollar of the overtime stayed the same. So that caused, every year, I'm sure, and this is my first year, but every year, I'm sure you saw a deficit in that line item. I'm assuming, but, so that's 1/3 of this whole thing. If you look, the other ones, the only other big one really is the legal services, and this is a very litigious town. A lot of legal services are needed, so those are the two big ones.
And again, to what Sue said, the money is available in other accounts where essentially that had overages, and it's just being transferred from the overages to the shortages.
Correct. Still balances out at the end. You got to remember
We end up
too.
with money that'll be going back into free cash because we have a little bit more overage than.
And there's turnbacks from different departments.
Okay.
But we pulled these out because that covers what we need, so.
I also do know that the snow and ice budget that's short $15,000, that entire 24-hour snowstorm and the following day for cleanup, it's about $125,000 for that storm, and that's going to be covered by FEMA. So we'll be getting that money back. We're just not getting it back today. We're getting it back whenever they get around to it. But I understand it's been approved. The emergency management director worked with the departments, and I saw some of the paperwork, and it's typical governmental nonsense where it's 400 pages when one would do. But it's been approved, and that check will be coming out, so I assume that will go right back into the general fund, and then that could wind up being free cash the following year.
And also earth removal expense, it went up $15 for postage, so I would have given them a book of stamps. And not
Well,
put it
I don't
on there,
understand how that can even show up here. I mean,
but- Well, it's still a shortage, so yeah.
you know, they couldn't walk in and hand it into the selectman's office and run this through the postage machine. It's $15.
Yep,
But in any case.
but anyway, that's,
Veteran services, another point, and I have no problem with the veteran services, but perhaps this coming year, just some food for everybody to think about. Mark Pinio had asked me if the finance committee would entertain a discretionary budget for the veteran services in the $2,500 range, where they would not have to go jump through hoops and weeks of trying to get approvals in order to pay a veteran's light bill whose lights were about to be shut off. So they would implement their own limits to it. They're not gonna pay your mortgage for 3 months, but it would, to avert a electric shut-off, or to give you 100 gallons of oil, or to, pay a past-due gas bill so they don't turn the heat off. And I thought that was a great idea, because, I actually questioned whether 2,500 was gonna be too little. But I think they need to have some discretionary budget somewhere in there in their account so that they can make that decision, even if it comes before, you know, the Veteran Services and run it by the town administrator or run it by the finance director. But it's something that doesn't take 3-4 weeks to get approved. So I think that there's just some food for thought. I happen to see it in the veterans line. I just think it's something that we should look at doing next
So
year.
you're recommending that for fiscal '24?
I am, absolutely.
Alan,
Yes, ma'am.
we had a discussion last week that there is an actual gift account where if anybody wants to donate to the Veterans Department, the money would go in that gift account and they would be able to use it based on the needs of a veteran.
Yeah, but we couldn't fund that gift account.
No, it would have to be donated by the community.
Right, so
But-
we'd have to put, if it was gonna be town funding, we'd have to put that in its own line item.
Correct.
The only other question I want to ask is the $100,000 health insurance ART 2016. That's just additional money we didn't need, that's not earmarked for any particular claim, future claim, pending claim, ongoing litigation, anything like that. That's money that's just,
Then
what is it?
It was an article that was voted in 2016 and been moved forward from there until now. And there's no real explanation to me or from anybody to explain for what that is there for.
I'm going to ask Mr. Clark to put his thinking cap on, because this has been a year that perhaps we were concerned about a larger increase than we had allowed for with the health insurance
I believe that's the year
premiums.
Michael put a hedge into the
We
article.
put a hedge into it, and it just kind of, and so it stayed there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it was double-digit inflation and costs
Yep.
that we were seeing all over in the health field.
I was also told that by John Carter, but I just wanted to check, because you were the chair of the board at that time, so. That's what I assumed it was, but people that see this number on a piece of paper, that's just the next question they're asking.
Yeah, and then it came in less than anticipated, resulting in the overage.
Now, this 362,000 that we're short, this takes into, this doesn't take into account the reduction in health insurance premiums, because that's next year, right?
That's next year.
Okay. This puts us in good shape, we don't have to do anything else after this?
Well, so the process
Do we
is
know-
that you vote this, and then it goes to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Which is on July 6th. And in case anything changes between now and July 6th, which I don't foresee it happening, do you? No. No, okay, so we'll be all set for the year, you won't have to have another meeting.
If something changes, we'd have to have a meeting around by
If
the
there's any
11th,
changes,
because you
yeah.
gotta get the changes in by the 15th, right?
Correct.
What's the will of the board? We can vote on this tonight and let the select board vote on it also on the 6th, or we can take it up on a meeting that we can have the 11th and see how the select board does this. It's whatever you guys want to do.
Pat's got a question.
Pat?
I just wanted to make a comment or two.
You're talking to Mike.
Grab a mic.
I didn't see anything extreme or unusual about a lot of what we see here. There's some big numbers there, and sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. I think that this being Bob's first year and Sue's first year, some of these things may be able to be worked out in coming years, but I would like to compliment them both on coming up with this and also coming up with the sources to cover it. I know what you walked into, and I know how difficult that was, and it took a lot of work and a lot of diligence to come up with this. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to echo Pat's comments. I've been doing this for a little while, but it's a pretty transparent way to present the information. And I don't remember seeing it in this form or fashion previously, so I appreciate it. It's pretty detailed. It's pretty clear what's happening. I think I have a follow-up question, which I can sort of anticipate what the answer is, but I think the fact that this is stuff that's all relatively straightforward, but were unforeseen things in the budget, like this was not your budget. You weren't here when this budget was done and have no idea sort of how it was constructed. So these types of things with the kind of turnover we've had should be expected, right?
Right.
But at the same time, there's nothing earth-shattering here from what I can tell. My only question would be, is knowing what we know now here, do you have any concerns about the FY23 budget that we just passed and foresee any of these things being a reoccurring issue again next year?
Yes. One is legal, and the other is police salaries. Very similar to what happened last year, other than the police added $4,000 additional money into the line item. But $4,000 from $125,000 this year is a short amount. So I foresee something happening down the road with the police. On the legal, we keep getting hit with these legal matters. The expenses just went up in legal with the law firm increasing their rates. So we may be in the same predicament with legal.
Okay.
But in the other budgets, now, I don't want to sound like, well, I'm going to take it. I'm going to make sure that they try to stay within their budget. And if there's a situation that needs to go outside of their budget, it's going to be because of an emergency type situation. But a budget, in my mind, is a budget that you should hold to. And, again, if something comes up like what happened this year and last year with COVID and other things, those things you can't control. But the things that you can control, I want them to control. And that's what we'll be diligent in looking at. So.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure, so we have the school department as a source that we're gonna pull 60,000 from. Are they okay with that?
I was getting to that. That's a donation from the school. The school stepped up and offered $60,000 to compensate for the police overtime budget because of the SRO officer at the school. And then when he's not available, they put an off-duty officer at the school. My intent, and I talked to Chief Dufley about this, my intent is I'd like to see the school fund an officer and the town fund an officer, and when school is in service, both schools, there's a cop on duty until, from the moment school opens to the moment school closes, whenever school's in session. And that should be the way it is. With what's going on in this country, we're not Sleepy Hollow, we don't live on an island, and I really think that, they do a terrific job in the job that they do. And the school's very cooperative. And I appreciate the $60,000 the school's willing to pony up to help the police budget. That's a great thing to have them do. I like to see them build that right into their budget and have it be so that we pay for one officer and they pay for one officer, and these schools are never without an officer in the parking lot, in the building, as long as school is in service. In a perfect world, but that's where the 60 came from. That was,
agree with you.
that was a nice gift, if you would.
Mr. Chair, also, the request was 40,000, and they kicked it up to 60,000.
That's right.
Which I thought was great.
That is true.
So.
That is true.
Mr.
So I
Chairman?
thought that was a big deal. Sir,
I would like if we're comfortable with it, to vote the transfers tonight. I think the select board would appreciate having our input as they consider whether to approve this. I think some of them would sort of defer since they don't get into the details quite as much as we do. I think certainly if they knew that we are comfortable with these, that may assist them when they go to consider the item. So I'd make a motion to approve the transfers as presented.
Second?
okay, a motion made and seconded to approve the transfers as presented. Any further discussion? No? I had a comment and now I just lost it. So. Oh, comment I had was, and we can vote this, it's not really pertinent to this piece of paper, but it's what Bob just said about the legal services being short next year and the police budget being short next year. And I think that's a very real possibility given the fact of what's happening. And I know that KP just went up on some of their rates, and, KP's gone up $100 an hour in the last 21 years, so it's really not it's not like we're getting fleeced here, because we're really not. So we're going to need to deal with that in the coming year also. So we're gonna find ourselves possibly right back with very similar numbers this time next year, and we do have reserves. A question I did have, I'm sorry, that I can remember now is opera any good for any of this? Because we have, what, 600,000?
Well, you know,
in
opera, if you use opera, it's gone. This is money already appropriated in the budget.
Okay.
So that's why we're transferring. One thing we're using opera for, just to update the finance committee, with the North Carver Water District, there's a bill out there, or a proposal, around $205,000 to buy membranes and replace the membranes at the treatment plant. So the select board last Thursday authorized up to $100,000 towards that on a loan to the North Carver Water District, and we'll enter into a MOU with them so that once they transfer the money out of their account at town meeting, it would go back into the use that the opera fund was being used for.
Aren't they
Because
sitting on a $500,000?
they
in
do,
their checking
but they
account?
would need town meeting action to transfer it, to buy the membranes.
Thought they had $500,000 in their account, that's why and we
Yeah.
still paid them their
No, but
loan.
again, they do. And so at town meeting, next town meeting, there'll be an article to transfer $100,000 or whatever it is back to the town so that it'll replenish what we took out of the opera funds. It's just kind of
So they can't
a
use
0% interest borrowing.
They can't use that $500,000 to operate their budget?
They can, but it requires town meeting vote.
Didn't town meeting approve the budget?
That wasn't
That
included.
wasn't included.
Town meeting did not approve,
They approved their budget, but the project, they hadn't gotten a quote yet for how much it was. So that project would have been from their undesignated fund balance or the retained earnings to pay for this project.
Would have been a
but
capital
We hadn't gotten a
project.
quote yet.
okay, I got you. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to get off track. There's a motion made and seconded to approve the year-end transfers as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. 7-0.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, that was easy. You guys are doing a great job. I like the way this is presented tonight because it's very easy to understand. And it's also much easier to see where it's coming from, and it makes sense. And the best part is the two numbers equal. When are
And
we?
Sue did most of this work,
Oh, I have
so
no doubt.
give her all the credit, no doubt. Thank you.
I have no doubt. When is the, I'm just teasing with you. When is the audit this year, do we know?
They
What-
came to do the preliminary, they came to do the preliminary last week, and they'll be back in October to finalize it. We have their audit from 2021 that they just finalized, and they're going to be presenting it to the selectmen September 6th.
Maybe we'll get invited to attend this time. We didn't get invited the last time.
You shall be invited.
Thank you. Okay. Discussion of the current FinCom bylaw and establishment of a subcommittee to revise. This was supposed to be done last year, and it obviously didn't get very far, so.
Can we release the town administrator and
Oh, sure.
finance director now?
Sure, I'm sorry, thank you so much. You're
you.
more than welcome to stay. We can get popcorn in a little bit, you know.
Thanks for the thought.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
guys.
Thanks, Bob. Everybody knows what my opinion of the FinCom bylaw is, and that it should be far less restrictive than it is right now, and it's not self-serving, but it is self-serving. I serve on the Conservation Commission, Pat serves on the RDA, Ron serves on the Cable Advisory Committee, Beth will now sit on Capital Outlay. Bottom line, my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that we didn't approve, we confirmed this transfer request tonight, which now is gonna go to the select board. The select board can very simply say, we don't care what the FinCom said, we don't like it, and it's out. And FinCom has nothing to say about it, because they don't answer, we answer to them, they don't answer to us. So that puts us in a place where we're nothing more than an advisory committee. That's it. We look at the numbers and we say, yeah, this makes sense, and go ahead and do it. And the selectmen can sit back and say, we don't feel like it, we don't wanna do that, to hell with it. The only free rein that we have is the $125,000 reserve fund, which town meeting gives us the power to control, and the $5,000 grant, the $25,000 in the grant account with a $5,000 maximum per applicant. That's 2 town meeting votes that essentially make us a mini town meeting for the purpose of those funds. Anything else we do is subject to the selectmen deciding whether they like it or not. So I don't, and I never have understood where they think there's a conflict. You've been around a long time, Ron. I don't get the conflict. Beth's husband Josh is a firefighter. When we do the fire department budget, Beth abstains. When Kate was on the committee and we did the EMS budget, Kate abstained because John was an EMS individual. I think we self-police. So I would like to see us construct a bylaw that makes a little bit more sense than the convoluted thing that's out there on the paperwork right now, which still says that we all should serve without pay since 2016, when that was changed by town meeting and never changed in the wording of the bylaw. And nobody can tell me how it got tied in with the Council on Aging. Nobody knows. So it's just time to clean that bylaw up, and I'd like to have a couple of members that would be willing to take this on. I'd like to have one who thinks that the bylaw should remain restrictive the way it is, and one who thinks it should change from what it is. Let you two guys, let 2 of you go duke it out and come back with something that will work, that we can try to present at, will probably now be spring town meeting, so apparently we're not having a fall town meeting, so. What are the thoughts of the board? You want to sit on this for a while? You want to chew it around and decide the next meeting? What are your thoughts? Anyone?
I'd like to get Bill's thoughts if we can, since he's at work, at least worked on it a little bit last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we met,
Grab the mic, Bill.
sorry, we met 3 times, and didn't get much done. I have a similar opinion as Alan does, and my approach was to hold to that. And I just could not find any common ground with the select board representatives. And then once Sean left, we stopped meeting. And then the bylaw, I wasn't even aware that it was going. You know, it was
You're talking about Sean, the moderator?
No, it's Sean,
Kevin,
right?
Kevin's home?
Morgan?
Sean
No,
was on the, he
Sean-
was on the
Sean
Oh,
finance.
Morgan.
yes. Sorry.
So he left the finance committee, he left town.
Oh,
And so
okay.
it was just
Gotcha.
me and Bob and Sarah, and we just couldn't get anywhere. And I don't,
Sarah Hewen and.
Bob Belbin and Sarah Hewen were the select board representatives. We just couldn't get anywhere. We had no common ground. And so I foresee that that'll likely be the case again if I'm involved.
When this was up, when we thought it might be coming up at town meeting, I did a quick survey of our local communities. Kingston's the only town I found that has no restrictions. Doesn't even mention that there are any restrictions about, you can be in the FinCom, and the bylaw is silent as far as being on any other. All the rest had some wording that was somewhat restrictive, but almost ambiguous a little bit. You couldn't really tell what the intent was. In fact, I think what they say, you cannot be an officer, back to that whole thing about what is an officer. I think we had our legal counsel indicate that if you sit on a committee, you're an officer of the town.
But then the bylaw says that if you're an officer of the town, you can't be on the FinCom. So it's a double-edged sword, because to be on the FinCom makes us an officer, but you can't be on the FinCom.
And that's where there was a lot of confusion reading other towns. I think these were, most of them, it's probably one town wrote it up, and then, like we all do, everyone sort of copied it off
Yeah.
of that one town and made some changes to it. So it's, I think the intent was maybe going back to a day when there was more, they felt that the finance arm should be completely independent and above reproach on the whole thing. But I think the point that, and as long as I've been around, I've just always heard If you're on the finance committee, you cannot be in any other committee, period. You know, that's just the way it is. And this, you know, when I was on it before, I had to get off the Council on Aging because I was on the finance committee. And I'm just not sure that holds up anymore, and especially when you consider we're an advisory committee. We don't hold any authority other than the reserve account and granting the
And we
grant
wouldn't hold
applications
that
and so forth.
authority if it wasn't for an annual town meeting vote to give us that authority.
Right.
Otherwise, that's not in perpetuity. That's an annual.
That's
vote at
subject to
town
annual
meeting.
appropriation.
That's right.
Right.
So if town meeting next year says, no, we don't want to do that anymore, then we don't have that either.
But given our advisory capacity, I'm not clear as to, and again, for a long time, I was in favor of it. But as the more I've thought about it and talked about it with other people and people from other towns, and a couple of those towns that have the restrictive bylaw, I don't think anyone's ever read the bylaw because they tell me they've got people sitting on the finance committee, they're on all sorts of other committees. So that, yeah, so I think it's, I had been somebody that felt if you're on the FinCom, you should not be in any of the committees, and I've sort of come around to believing that I don't know that it makes any difference. In fact, that you could almost argue that if you're on some other committees, it broadens your view of the town and how the town operates.
Yeah, I think my position's been pretty consistent since we started this conversation like 3 years ago. In that, my personal opinion is I don't really care which it is, but it should be clear which it is. And if the town, at town meeting, feels as though they do not want the members sitting on FinCom to serve on other boards and committees, then we honor that. If the town doesn't care, then we honor that. But what we have right now is a bylaw that's confusing and ambiguous, and there's zero enforcement because several members of this committee have been appointed to other boards and committees while serving on this
Right.
committee. So the bylaw exists and they continue to reappoint people to other boards and committees. So, and I don't believe in or agree with the assertion that you're an executive of the town if you serve on a committee that's established by state statute. I know that's a legal opinion, and that's fine, but ad hoc committees are perfectly fine, right? I just
And
don't.
the RDA is perfectly fine, so I've been told, because the RDA is not a town committee, it's a state committee.
Even though you vote them in.
It's very
The
confusing,
whole
right?
thing is just,
And there's no real clear-cut rhyme or reason to why, when it's applied and when it's not applied, except depends on who you're aligned with and who you like and whether they want you on a board or committee bad enough, right? And that is really the issue, in my opinion, with the current bylaw. And I'd like to see that cleaned up. I agree with Ron. If it's gonna be, if you're on FinCom, you can't serve on anything, then that's all it should state. And it doesn't need to be any more elaborate than that.
And you can get paid.
Exactly.
well, yeah.
But if you're allowed to serve on other boards and committees, then it shouldn't be, well, you're allowed to serve on these 8, but not on these 5, right? I mean, it's just far too confusing and it's not enforced anyway. So what's the point of having the bylaw, in my opinion? So I'd like to see it cleaned up for those reasons so that we don't have this ambiguity and this confusion and then they can enforce it as they see fit based on what language is in there. But I think it needs to be cleaned up.
And,
So that we
and
don't
for a
have these
long
problems
time,
moving
it
forward.
really was, if you're on the FinCom, you can't be anywhere else. And then we had a recent TA that had a slightly different interpretation of the bylaw, and that's when appointments started to be broader, which has brought us to, and then there were some personality conflicts that led to discussions about who should or shouldn't be on the FinCom. So that, yeah, you can write the bylaw very clearly, either restrict it, if you're on the finance committee, you cannot be in any other boards or committees, period, and you receive a stipend. Or you have no restrictions. The only thing I mean, I throw it out just for purpose of discussion. I think right now, supposedly you can't be on more than one permitting board. Didn't we pass that?
was
Correct.
last year. You can't
And that would still be in play,
I
in
would agree,
place,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
that we'd all still be subject to
It's not
that, even
relevant
if
to
we're
the
on the
FinCom,
finance
right.
committee,
Sure, it's
so.
not relevant to us.
As a former member of the select board, are you aware of a bylaw that says a member of the select board cannot serve on other boards and committees? Because I thought there was one discussed and considered, but it was never voted on and approved. Which means the people that have to approve everything we do are allowed to serve on other boards and committees.
I don't think it's happened.
But no,
But-
because most of them, right, the five-member board, they're busy enough with select board business,
Yeah.
they're not looking to. However, there are members of the select board that, while they were members of the select board, served on other boards and committees with budgets or ad hoc committees that were not in the order of, or in the, under the umbrella of the work that they were asked to do on behalf of the select board. For instance, if they establish an ad hoc committee and the select board, a select board representative has to serve on that committee, they vote members on. But other members of the select board have then, outside of the select board, applied for and been placed on ad hoc
Really?
committees. Yes.
Oh,
Applied-
ad hoc, yeah.
Yeah, ad hoc committees and whatnot.
There usually has been a distinction between ad hoc and permanent committees.
And then in addition to that, there are other committees within town that have budgets, and members of the select board have served on those boards and committees while they were concurrently working as a member of the select board. So for me, if it's relevant to the FinCom, it should also be relevant to the select board. And I think the language should be clear for both, because essentially we have no power and no authority. It's the select board that does. We're simply
I would,
advisory.
I would think it makes much more sense to restrict the select board
I concur.
from being on any other committee.
Well, it should, I was under the impression that that was in the bylaws.
I don't think so. I think it was in a proposed bylaw a couple years ago, but it was never brought up and voted on at town meeting.
I know I had written the bylaw change for the FinCom, and the only restriction that I gave the FinCom bylaw was that except that no member of the select board could serve on FinCom. You could not be a town employee or have a financial interest in the town, and then I defined what that was. So you could not be we couldn't hire you to be a consultant for us at $50,000 a year and have you serve on the FinCom, because there'd be an obvious conflict there. And then I left the rest of it up to the honor system as far as whether you're comfortable voting for the fire department budget, even though we're not voting on the call firefighters' salaries, there's no need of her to abstain. But she chose to in all transparency, and I admire that.
Marie Zweigman used to do the same thing with the library, because she's
Right,
a library
that's
trustee.
right.
She
Now,
doesn't benefit personally financially from a library budget.
That's right.
And
But
even
she
then,
probably
as an
does.
advisory board, we're making a recommendation as
Correct.
opposed to a select board that's
Correct.
actually approving the budget.
Correct.
That's right.
It's their budget.
So
not
that
our
I
budget.
would think there's less conflict even if Beth were to not
Sure.
recuse herself, because it's just advice. I think it looks much better if there's an appearance of a conflict, to just recuse yourself. I just
Sure,
think it's more.
and I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I think that Adam's 100% right. I think the way the current bylaw is written, they just seem to have kept adding to it. And this all came to light a couple of years ago. I had to go and do the research on the stipend, because the bylaw says, except the finance committee shall serve without pay, except for the chair, who gets something to do with paper and ink in a reimbursement fashion. And nobody was gonna get a stipend. Not that we're paid a gazillion dollars, it's $150 to serve on the FinCom and $300 for the chairman. And I'm gonna retire on that money, by the way. And there was gonna be no check cut because it said in the bylaws. And I had to go research the governance committee, which 2016 town meeting, they put it in the stipend schedule, and town meeting voted for it. And then, of course, it was never followed up in the language of the bylaw. So I had to go and get copies and print, and then go to the individual who was saying you can't get a check and say, this is what's going on, the bylaw's wrong. It should have been changed. Oh, yeah, we'll do that. Well, that was in 2019. This is 2022. The bylaw still reads exactly the same as it did in 2019.
And I'll guarantee you, we took it from somewhere else. And over the years, maybe it
And
adapted
somehow,
one or two things.
Council on Aging got thrown into the wording with the Finance Committee, and that's the only place that it shows up, by the way.
Well, because there was a time, at one time in our history, there was a time where somebody would run to be on the select board and also say, and I want to be on the FinCom, and I also want to do this, because at one time it made sense for them to control everything, right? I think those are
Well, we had
concerns that you have from anybody
had
and everybody.
employees that were
But it
selected.
just doesn't, well, absolutely.
It
and at the
really,
time,
it
these-
really,
Epitome of a conflict of interest.
a second grader should be able to read it and figure out what the intent
I
is.
Pretty
couldn't
much.
agree more. And I think the intent of the current bylaw could not be any more cloudy.
I think if you put 4 attorneys in the room with the current bylaw, and
You get
had
4 different
had them
opinions.
give you a written opinion, you get 4 different written opinions. That's how whacked out the bylaw. So
I
just
just
something-
asked Pat said he'd be willing to work with me to try to come up with develop a bylaw, if that's okay with the
I don't
rest
have
of
a
the
problem
committee.
with that. Bill, you wanna get involved in that again, because you weren't involved in it before?
Yeah,
I have my fun. I'm good.
Anybody else wanna join the Bobbsey twins over here?
I think,
the who?
I think as long as Bill's okay with that,
Twins.
we're perfectly fine.
I say that with love.
Yeah.
You guys will be great at it. You will.
You
No,
should,
it's
there's a lot of bickering here.
I need a motion.
Motion to appoint Pat and Ron to the FinCom bylaw subcommittee on
Second.
behalf of the Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Pat Mahar and Ron Clark to the FinCom bylaw review subcommittee to come up with a possible revision. That good? Any further discussion?
I'm assuming that basically this is gonna be for the spring town meeting, so
Yeah.
this doesn't have to be done
Oh,
by the end of
yeah,
the
there's
month.
gonna be no fall town meeting now with this transfer thing.
By
I think
Labor
we're
Day.
good.
Labor Day?
Language by Labor Day.
Okay.
Yeah, can we do, like, yeah.
I suppose we could, I mean,
I don't think you have to worry about Labor Day. I think we could, what do you think? We could probably put this off until
Plenty of time.
Thanksgiving.
December.
in the
Christmas.
fall. We'll
December,
bring
so we
something
have
to
a
you
placeholder
for.
on the warrant.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's get a placeholder on the warrant, and this
Okay.
is, and then we'll let the select board go play with whatever they wanna play with. I'm not putting the two of us together anymore. We'll present our bylaw change, they can present their bylaw change, and may the best man win. We tried it the other way, it didn't work. So. Minutes of,
We gotta vote.
oh, I'm sorry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Congratulations. I get your T-shirts, little T-shirts. Finance Committee bylaw review. You have no budget, so I don't want to hear that you had to discuss the bylaw over, a meal at Mezzaluna. Don't come in with a receipt.
We're gonna talk down the gun club.
It's the only place you're allowed. Minutes of May 23rd. Any changes, corrections, omissions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 23rd, 2022.
Go ahead.
Second?
Yes, could we just
Discussion.
add an E to the end of Clark on the,
Sorry. Usually I pick up that stuff.
it changes the pronunciation.
Clark A?
Clark, eh?
It's French? French
No,
Canadian?
it's Clark. Without the E, it's Clark. The mistake you make is you listen to me.
Thought I was talking to Eric for a minute there. Jermaine, E, no E. Sounds the same to me. Okay, is there any other corrections aside from the E on Mr. Clark's name? So the motion would be as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, 7-0. Is everybody here? Yeah. Yeah. We'll find out if Tony's gonna stay on or not, because this is his second meeting he's missed. There's nothing 48 hours in advance. The to be determined was in case you were gonna do a July 11th meeting. At this point, in case, is everybody available on the 11th? That's a Monday. It's the second Monday in July. We'll put a little
Yes.
placeholder in just in case something else goes and Sue needs something. We still have, I don't know, $18,000 in our reserve account that if there's any last minute that this isn't gonna cover, but I have a funny feeling that if anybody else comes up, so I know 15,000 of this was, for the fire department for emergency repair work to their stuff. There was originally gonna be a transfer and didn't have to be, so. But if everybody's available that day, that night rather, the 11th.
I'm
As of
good.
right now, I am.
Okay, so let's leave it loose.
But that's only if needed.
Yeah, that's only, I'm not gonna even post it.
Okay.
Obviously, I'll put it, I'll get it posted the previous Thursday, but that's just like it's a stopgap in case, because the selectmen have their meeting on the 6th. So they should be fine with this, and then anything else happens that week. What I might end up doing is just sticking it up there on the calendar, but I can always do a canceled if we need to. I just want to get the placeholder. Any other comments?
I had something I wanted to throw out there, if it was okay.
Throw away.
I was thinking when we approach the budget next year, maybe we should come up with a budget calendar for our group, or what everyone else thinks. I just thought last year, I know there was a lot of new players and everything, but I just think it would be helpful for us if we had some type of a calendar that we expected at least things to have been shown to us by, revenue, say by a certain month, and free cash by a certain month, and expenses and capital.
There actually is that the TA is supposed to follow.
There is,
And I
okay.
think because of all the transition with the finance director and the TA, so I think what we should do is formally ask the town administrator to make sure that they follow the because Michael installed that
Okay.
4 or 5
And I
years
have a
ago.
feeling that Bob
And we were
would like
done
nothing
by
better.
early January, practically.
Yeah,
Yeah, by doing that.
I think that Bob would like nothing better than that. I think that last fall, pretty much everything kind of ran off the rails between the pandemic and then coming back and then the end of the year with the TA search and so forth. I think that Bob will be much more disciplined.
But, there is an actual
Yes, there is.
sheet of paper
Okay.
that spells out the dates that things should be done. So if you could make him aware of that, and
Yeah.
he can dig it up in case it's not,
Because we were wrapping things up.
Front?
That's right.
yeah, we were done by early
done.
January.
We started
Yeah.
doing department interviews in, end of October, beginning of
Yeah.
November, instead of waiting until after Christmas.
No, it's understandable with all the transition and everything going on, how this year got more convoluted.
Yeah.
But the years prior to that, it was like clockwork.
yeah, no, I didn't know we already had one. I was just putting that idea out there.
Yep. Anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good night.